Today we're going to talk about something that should be fairly rudimentary, but it took me quite some time before I realized the importance. In previous shows where we're baking, we've talked about measurement and about grams and weighing and all those types of things, but let's take a few minutes and delve into why these things are important. Welcome to Measure Up. So there's a difference. Difference between measurements, measuring tools. Here you see a variety of different things you probably have in your house. We have scales. Hopefully you have one. If not, you may want to get one. You'll find out exactly why it's so important. We have measuring cups, both the plastic that you look down on and can see, as well as the clear Pyrexes. These are generally referred to as liquid measuring cups. Over here we have your tried and true dry measuring cups. These are some of my favorites. These are actually measuring cups, but shaped in a spoon, and they're very heavy. It's easy for me to put in here. Then we have, of course, teaspoons and tablespoons, and a couple of sifters, and we're going to talk about why that matters in just a moment. You should have all of these in your repertoire, both the dry measurement and the wet measurement. Let's talk about our dry measurement first. So we're talking about dry measure, flour, sugar, that type of thing. And these are 2 cups. This one is a really heavy spoon-like cup measure, and this one is your typical round, straight-edged one that you see most of the time. I love this one because it handles so easy, and it's real easy to use, and it's heavy. I like that feeling. This one is pretty standard. It's just a light aluminum of 1 cup. These both hold the same amount of flour or sugar. When we start converting 1 cup into ounces or into grams, we have to think a little bit about the difference between weight and volume. Volume, how much space it takes up. Weight, how much it weighs against the earth. If we say a cup is 8 ounces, and we say, well, that's a cup, I'm going to do a measurement tool and I'm just going to have 8 ounces, that may not be correct. When we're measuring volume, this cup of flour will measure 8 ounces. But if we could do, let's say, chocolate chips, because they're big and there's space in between, the volume of them being 1 cup is really only 6 ounces. So if you automatically decided, I'm going to weigh everything and I'm going to do 8 ounces of chocolate chips, you now have a third over what you were supposed to have. It's very important when we look also to dry measure in sifted or not sifted. Many times you'll see a recipe that says 1 cup sifted flour or 1 cup flour sifted. And those are 2 different things. The first one, 1 cup sifted flour, means you've sifted it first and then you've measured it. The second one means you measured it first, 1 cup, and then you sifted it. These are very different and can really lead to some problems when you're baking. And it's something I think all of us struggle with at the very beginning, because at my house, my grandmother just grabbed whatever coffee cup we had, and this for her was a teaspoon if she used it at all, and we had weights that weren't accurate. It's one of the reasons why if you've ever tried to bake something that grandmother made, it may not taste the same, because her measuring was different. So let's talk about sifting just a little bit. If we have a recipe that says 1 cup of sifted flour, it means that we've sifted it first and then measured the volume of 1 cup. Sifted flour is going to weigh, weight-wise, less than regular, just unsifted flour, because now we've introduced air and it's going to take up less space. It's going to take up more space, Therefore, it's going to weigh less. So we can't convert that into ounces. So before we do that, why do we use grams? Grams are easy to double and to cut in half. If you've ever tried a recipe that says 1 cup and then 3/8 of a cup. Divide that in half and try to make it accurate. It can be done, of course, but it's complicated versus if I have 120 grams of flour, now I only need 60 grams. We're going to look at volume measuring, for instance, just some flour. This is just a typical 1 cup measuring cup that you would get anywhere. You probably already have these. And it was the most common measure in our system, especially in older cookbooks. So if you got grandmother's recipe, she's probably going to say 1 or 2 cups. And remember that she didn't always have this. She usually had a cup that was similar, or maybe she had this, or who knows. But it may be a tip as to why that didn't turn out. But let's look at how to volume weigh 1 cup of flour or sugar or anything else that is a dry ingredient that you're going to volume weigh. So we have put this in here. We're going to take this offset spatula, or you could use the back of a butter knife, anything that's straight and flat and easy to hold, and you can just go right across it and just clean that off just like this. And that's called a dip and sweep. This cannot be done if you're using this. So let's say that you use these, the glass ones. The reason they're glass and they have a pouring spout is because it's a liquid measure. Dry measure, liquid measure. So if we then try to do a 1 cup, let's put this one back. And now let's do one here. We're going to do, this is a 1 cup container. You can see we're over the top already, but how do you level it? Well, you might do this, and then you might do this, which just packed down your flour or your sugar or whatever you had in here, and now you will have more than what you would have had here. So volume isn't the greatest way to measure, especially for baking. Now, if it's something else, maybe just general cooking, a sauce or something, it's accurate enough because you can look at it and see it. But baking, once it's mixed in the oven, it's done, nothing you can do about it. So we want to use these for dry measure and these for wet measure. So let's take a look at sifting and then not sifting and measuring. Let's take a look at sifted measure. We're going to measure out 1 cup of sifted flour. In order to do that, I'm going to take quite a bit. This is a 1 cup measuring cup, and I'm just going to take quite a bit because it's hard to get that sifted flour without packing it down. So I've put in approximately 2 cups here into this large bowl. And I'm going to sift this out. Now, if you want to, you can also do this. You can place this in the center and see if it fills up. It's a little bit messier, but we're going to do it, I'll tell you what, we'll do it both ways. So we're going to put this guy in here, and we're going to sift it until he is completely filled. And as you can see, this is it's a hard way to do it, but you can still do it this way. You can do it any way that works for you. Okay. Now we have this is sifted flour. We're going to do the sweep method. As you can see, it's hard to get that to fill when you're using a large thing like that. So we don't really have a cup because you can see there's an indentation there. Well, couldn't I just add some to it? Sure. Let's go ahead and just add a little bit to it. Remember, every time you handle it, it's going to pack it. And this is 1 cup of sifted flour. If we do it after we've just sifted it, let's assume that I haven't repacked that and we've just sifted it, we can take our scoop and do this, just like we did when we got it out of the container. That's still not enough. Because sifted flour is so fine, it is hard. This was 2 cups originally to get that, and like this. So now we have a cup of sifted flour, which is going to weigh less than the flour before. and it'll weigh a lot less than if you would have used this and shook it around and did like this to get a level. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about with the dry measure. Next, we're going to look at wet measure. We're going to talk about liquid measure. If we tried to use one of these and we wanted to measure 1 cup, we'd have to pour it all the way to the top edge and then try our best to not spill it and pour it in. It's why we don't use these in order to measure. Well, you may say to yourself, well, it says on the side, you know, 1/2 cup, I can pour it up to just that and then pour it. You could, but again, get in the habit of doing things the easy way. These are made clear so that you can see, and while you may need 2 cups, this is a 2-cup measuring cup. If you need 2 cups, notice that there's extra at the top. It isn't at the very top, so that you have room to begin to pour. So we have here some water. This is 750 milliliters of water, or 3 cups. It depends on your angle. It is so crazy. You look at that and you say, that's 3 cups. Then you do this, and you go, that's slightly not 3 cups. So they do have these. OXO came out with these, and I like them. I use them frequently, that has the measuring at the top. These are going to be a little easier for you to do. These are plastic, and you'll get some wear from like the dishwasher and such, but they have a good grip on it, and they have a sharp edge to pour. So if you're pouring something that's relatively thin, this will pour it very well. Let's look at the spout on this one. If you'll notice, this one's wider. It's a wider look. See, one of them's a wider spout, and one of them's very pointed. I wouldn't want to try to pour something heavy like oil or melted butter out of this one, because it would come to the lip and just start going over, and you would have a mistake. You would have mess. If you use this one and you're trying to pour something like oil, it has a place for that to gather before it drops in. So if I were going to be measuring something more viscous or thick, I would use one like this. If I was going to be using water especially, or something very thin, I would use this. So when we start to measure, we want to get down at the eye level of whatever it is. If you have this ability, you can see that it's not quite 3 cups. If I look at it from here, it looks like 3 cups. Is that really going to make a difference? It may not make a difference to you, but it will make a difference when you're trying to be consistent with what you're making. So if your measurements are always the same and they're always accurate and you like what came out, it will come out that way every single time. So we want to look at measuring this in fluid ounces versus dry ounces if you begin to use a scale. So when you click on the different types of weights, it'll go through 1 pound in ounces, which is a dry weight, or it'll go through fluid ounces, and you can go through there. It is going to be a different, or grams, of course. So when we're talking about liquid, let's also look at our little friends, the measuring spoons. So this is 1 tablespoon. And again, the heavier this is, the more professionally made these are, the better off you're going to be. I like this little group because this is really big and easy to see, and it has a very sharp edge. So if I did use it for dry, if I needed 1 tablespoon or a teaspoon of baking soda or baking powder, this is what I would go to and use the same dip and sweep. If it's liquid, I can then, of course, pouring over something, let's say I needed a tablespoon, it's a lot of vanilla, then I can just pour it directly in here and make sure I don't make a huge mess, and take it and directly pour it in. It's going to be right up to the edge. So why is it different for a small thing like that to use something that's going to go right to the edge and not something like this? We talked about we wouldn't want to use this for liquid because it would go up against the top. Well, look, we're talking about a teaspoon. I think you can take a teaspoon and pour. But this, when you start to pour, it's going to come over the edges and it's going to leak down from behind and go onto your table. You'll notice that happens many times. So when we are measuring, I hope these things help straighten this out for you just a little bit, and that you can decide. If you don't have a kitchen scale and you don't want to convert to the metric system, or you don't want to just weigh something out every time, the dip and sweep for dry is as good as you're going to get, and the squat down to eye level for your liquids is as good as you're going to get. However, your best bet is always to use weight. Weight will never vary no matter what. It will always be exactly the same amount. Thank you for watching Measuring Up, Problems in Your Measuring, and we'll see you again.